Open their books to 1246, or, as I was saying in Japanese, Hon o kete onegaishimasu. Page 3246 in 1246.
Which book is that?
Love. It's one of the huge elements of the story. That would be pronounced ski, or as it would more formally be known, daisuki, for great love. Now that's interesting because this is the kanji for woman, this is the kanji for child. So a woman's relationship with her child, that strong bond. And when you add the kanji big, it means a very great and powerful love. So that is, of course, one of the main elements. Another element is death. Shime. Because if you read it in the rights, his love, the lady Murokashi, the lady of the court, she fades away and dies. He holds her in his arms and madness takes him before he finally regains himself. Now, of course, Genji is a tale that was told it's about the year 1000. And it's basically being told by a lady of the court, a lady in waiting, Murokashi, who is telling the tale to the other ladies of the court. And so now I made a nice little introduction. I'll let everybody watch.
皆さん、おはよう。今日は源氏物語を話します。日本語の文化が一番目、そして最終な文学です。
Of the Japanese instrument known as the koto. Oddly enough, it's an instrument that is made by using the belly of a cat.
The belly of a cat?
Yes, which is actually much more common in musical instruments than you might think. Believe me, when I read about this the first time, I was a little bit shocked too. Well, anyway, as I was saying, it was about Lady Murokashi, and she was a lady waiting in the court of the emperor. And it's considered to be one of the world's first novels. Now, of course, here is Genji. He was known as Hikaru Genji, or Shining Genji. He was the son of the emperor, destined for greatness. But because of political reasons, he was actually knocked down to the status of commoner, being given the name Genji Minamoto. When he was exiled from the court, he began a long life. He was a great warrior and a very handsome fellow. So one of the things about this book, he had many, many loves. It's actually one of those things that humorously, you hear about anime having the harem comedies. Well, this was the first harem. This guy was he had several wives, and he also, strange enough, had many women who he took and actually started calling his daughter, which you'll hear about in one of the Fireflies. Now, the main tales I'm focusing on are, of course, Lady Ayakashi, Fireflies, and the Rights. Now, what you see here is one of the early transcripts from the 1900s when they actually took and translated this into Japanese for the modern dialect. Because when this story was written, with less than 200 years, the Japanese language had evolved more so, and it was practically unreadable. So it was carried on more in a oral tradition, and it was eventually translated, and it was actually brought to the English language by Virginia Woolf, who did the translation, a translation done by Arthur Whaley in 1925. But it's really interesting that I think that this is done because Japanese is the Japanese society is very male-driven. It's not equal. It's not equal. There, in modern day society, on Valentine's Day, the women can spend $300 or so on chocolates, whereas the men might only spend $30 or $40 on White Day a month later. A legitimate proposal to your wife is, I would like you to fix my miso soup every morning, or I would like you to shine my shoes every morning. This is a legitimate proposal in today's society. Now, the first story, the Lady at Ayakashi. After Genji has been exiled, and he was married at the age of 12. to his first wife, who was 16 at the time. Which, you know, kind of odd if you think about it in historical context, where typically the man is much older, but he was the son of the emperor, so, you know, he's not worried about being established. Now, on his journey to Aikashi, he is beset by many hardships. There's a great storm, and he constantly is praying to Buddha to deliver him and his men, and he's receiving correspondence from the Lady Murasaki, who is, of course, a fictional character in the story, as well as the name of the woman who wrote the actual story herself. Now, on his journey, she tells about how it's like a punishment from the gods has been levied upon the people, so great are the storms that are occurring. Well, he goes on this journey and eventually makes it to Akashi, where finally the weather lets up and he meets a monk. This monk has a daughter who is, of course, very well versed, and the monk, having aspirations towards higher things, knowing who Genji is, essentially sells the idea to Genji to become involved with his daughter. They begin a long line of correspondences by letter, and she is so eloquent, despite having no training in the ways of the court, and her ability to play the koto, as we were hearing earlier, was so great that he fell in love without ever having met her. And they continued corresponding for quite some time, and he actually wrote back to his wife, Minokashi, and told her that he was going to marry this woman as well. So he meets her for the first time. And when he does, he's very forward, because he thinks that the relationship's a lot more than what it is. But she is immediately backed down. She immediately backs away and is offended because it's forwardness. Because she didn't realize how much her father had been pushing her to be in the relationship. Now, of course, he did win her over and did marry her, and their daughter actually went on to become the empress, which is kind of a interesting little twist. Now, the second story, Fireflies. It involves when later on Genji's still in Aikashi, and he has adopted a daughter, Tamakazura, who is actually Tono Chujo's daughter. And during this whole story, Tono Chujo is actually having these strange dreams about Buddha and righteousness, and of course that his daughter is actually Tamakazura. And so, he spends his whole time with his undertone, but at the same time, Genji, who's his daughter, he's trying to actually marry her off to the Prince Hontaru. And he arranged for them to meet between a veil for the first time and have her be seen to him by the light of fireflies. Now, eventually they do become involved, but that's much later on. And you were going to... of course, we'll now move on to the final of the three stories. And that it would be the rites. Genji, finally being able to return many years later to the capital, which is Kyoto, which is the ancient capital of Japan. Because this would be during the Heian dynasty, which happened between 900 and 1200 Common Era CE. And of course, this taking place about 1000. This is, pretty much during the height of the Heian period. Well, when he returns back to Kyoto, he finds that Murasaki has taken ill. And she is ill for a very long period of time, but even though as she's wasting away, her beauty is so great that it doesn't fade. And eventually death takes her. And of course, we see in this illustration a picture of him after she has passed, and he's completely beset by grief. And he actually goes not mad with just grief, but eventually calms himself down to perform the ceremonial rites of the funeral. And it's a really tragic passing. The entire court mourns this loss. because she was such an important part of the court. And now, of course, one of the things about this is that there is the constant mention of the religions. Now, one of the interesting things is that there are two main religions in Japan, albeit neither of them are typically claimed. The Japanese will tell you they're not a religious people, but they have many rites. The first and most joyous of the rites is that of Shinto, which is it's divinity in everything. Everything has a spirit. Everything has an importance about it. And they take this to be that, this pen right here would have a spirit about it. That desk, anything does. And it's used for more lighthearted ceremonies such as coming of age ceremonies, and just happy parts in life, marriages. But you have the second element, and that of Buddhism, which typically deals with death. And of course, in believing in Buddhism, there is the belief of rebirth. But there is sometimes a passing of relationships between that, but it's not a guaranteed thing. And these Buddhist events are more somber, and they have things like when you are having a funeral ceremony, you will take a bowl of rice and stick chopsticks straight up in it, and that is a gift to the dead. When someone passes, you'll keep an altar of them usually. If they're very important to you, you'll have a picture of them and a candle and maybe some incense, and you would light it when you want to take and pray for their future, for their spirit, for their soul. And it's just, and of course, when he's facing these hardships and these losses, it's Buddhism he goes to, because that's very much the system they fall into when they come upon things that could be potential life-ending or actual life-ending ceremonies. Now, one other thing I do want to mention on before I go is in the Japanese, there are the elements of writing. Now, the Japanese writing system came from China. Of course, it was brought over several times. So you have things like multiple readings. You have one kanji that means one particular thing, but it's used in several kanji. It's all due to trade. And it's all context-based. Now, one thing you might notice is that you have things like this, which actually are a writing system that was developed called hiragana, because you have three main writing systems in Japanese: the hiragana, katakana, and the kanji. Now, hiragana actually was developed by women as a secret code because they weren't allowed to learn the katakana, which is men only. The thing about hiragana is it's very curvy, whereas this right here, if you have it in katakana, very angular, it's still But the katakana was the official language that was used by the men, because as I was saying earlier, male-dominant society, so there's not the equality. Women weren't taught how to write in that, so they just formed their own. And now you'd use this for, nowadays though, hiragana is actually used for native Japanese words as well as the kanji. But a word such as arubaito is a German word that means part-time work. And so it will be used in the katakana. So just a little bit of food for thought for the Japanese writing system. Oh, thank you.